So I think you have to tell it yes, that you're okay with that. Okay, so we're going to do this photographing the night sky masterclass. So Sarah, you've done masterclass with me before. Jennifer, have you done masterclass?
Yes, I did the flower photography.
Okay, very good. So you all know the routine. Lynette's done the same thing. So you all know the routine, which gives us this ability to spend the next 4 weeks together. And I get to see your homework and you all get to talk to each other. And so it makes it a whole lot deeper than if we were just doing a simple little one-time class. So you all know the routine. On your handout, I am going to skip around a bit. There's Lynette. We got her. Hey, Lynette. Looks like she's in. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to skip around a bit, and we're going to skip around a bit based on what's happening in the night sky, because beginning to Saturday, that's when we hit our darkest time of this month of June. And then our full moon isn't ready until the latter part, close to the 4th of July. So we're going to skip around a bit on the handout to accommodate what's going on in our night sky right now. So that's a little bit of an explanation for why we might skip around on the handout. So starting out in the beginning on page 1 of the handout, we're going to start with sunrise and sunset. And the beautiful thing about sunrise and sunset is we have one every morning and we have one every evening. And so whether if you blow it on one morning, then we've always got another morning to work on. We've always got another evening to work on. And so it's nice with the sunrise and sunset because there's always going to be an opportunity. And yes, we might get fogged in one morning or clouded in, but there's always an opportunity. So your sunrise and your sunset. And Lynette, can you hear me? Oh, she's frozen. I see where she is. Okay, she's frozen. So we'll just let her continue. Okay. So your sunrise and sunset, all you do is meter off the sky. So you're going to be in your evaluative or your matrix light meter. Jennifer, which camera are you using?
The Nikon D5.
D5. Okay. So you're going to, for Jennifer, you'll be in your matrix light meter. Sarah, you're using your Sony, correct?
Yes, Sony.
Okay. So your Sony, you'll be in your segmented light meter, the one that has the whole sections. And then Lynette, you'll be in your evaluative light meter. And that light meter is taking into account the entire light in all of the frame. So you'll meter off of the scene and you'll underexpose by 1. That underexposing by 1 creates those beautiful black silhouettes. At the beginning of sunset, you might underexpose by 2. And then you're going to underexpose by 1. And then when the sun gets really close to the horizon and maybe even goes slightly below the horizon, you might be able to go back to a balanced light meter. So starting out, you're going to be 2 stops underexposed, but then you'll go to 1 stop underexposed, and then you'll be able to properly balance your light meter as the sun finally goes down. Don't include a lot of foreground in your scene. If you look at this shot from the Pantanal, you can tell as a human that there is a foreground here, but the foreground's not necessary. The less foreground that you include in your scene, the easier it is for you to get those beautiful black silhouettes. If you include more foreground in the scene, then it's going to be harder. And if the clouds are moving based on the wind, then go ahead and let yourself get a longer shutter speed, because then we can blur out the clouds as they're moving. So I like a stiff wind in the upper atmosphere because it allows us to blur out the clouds in the upper atmosphere. And if we want to use our telephoto lens, this is when we can really compress things. So Sarah was talking about the sunset photo that I did of the Pelican and the Danube Delta. That was with the 100 to 500 millimeter lens. So here with the windmills, this is also with the 500 millimeter lens. So if we want to compress things, remember that your telephoto lens compresses and your wide angle lens spreads out. So your telephoto lens can be beautiful on a sunset. And then that's how you get this big ball also, is with your 500 millimeter lens or a 400 millimeter lens. That's how you get that big shining hot summer sunset coming through. If you do include the foreground, then realize that it's going to be dark on the picture that you see on the back of your camera. Don't worry about that, because that foreground is going to be able to be processed out so that you can see the detail in your foreground. So this photo from the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania, on the back of my camera, the whole foreground looked like it was dark, but I knew that I could use my shadow slider in that foreground, and I could bring out the foreground with my shadow slider. So it wasn't, if you're going to include that foreground, just realize it's going to be dark on the camera, but we can include it, we can bring it out in our shadow slider. You made it, Lynette. I see you now.
Yes, I'm having trouble with my usual.
Yeah, your usual internet where you are. Yes, exactly.
Hopefully I'll get my Starlink next week.
Okay. So you're in.
It's okay. You're good.
Okay. This crepuscular rays, these rays that you see here up against the top in the sky, these are called crepuscular rays. And those crepuscular rays happen when the sun is blocked. I hear myself echoing. Am I echoing on your end?
No.
I hear the echo. Yes, I hear it.
You hear the echo? Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you all mute yourselves? Or here, yeah, okay, good. And then I can always, there we go, that did it. And then I can always unmute you, or you can unmute yourself when you need to ask a question. But the crepuscular rays happen when the clouds block the sun. So some people call these God rays, but they're officially known as crepuscular rays. If you see those crepuscular rays in your sunset or your sunrise, or even during the day, know that if we use software from Nik, and Nik is an add-on software that you would add to your Photoshop or your Adobe Creative Cloud. Nik is a software that you would use as an add-on, and it has this piece of software called in color effects called Detail Extractor. And the Detail Extractor brings out those crepuscular rays and makes them more enhanced. So you're not going to see it really good on your Photoshop, or your Lightroom, your Adobe Camera Raw. You're not going to see it really well. But then if you want to see those crepuscular rays a little bit better, go ahead and download the Nik software. I think it costs $99. It's not very expensive, and use that Detail Extractor and color effects, because that's when you can really, really, really pull out those rays and make them look interesting. So here's another example of that, where pulling out those rays makes the photo a lot more interesting, but I didn't see those rays on the back of the camera. So those crepuscular rays also make your sunset quite interesting. Notice too that I've got the beginning of a starburst, and you all know how to do your starburst, your F22, and you get the starburst off of something that's partially blocking the sun. In this case, the clouds are partially blocking the sun, and so that gives us the starburst on the F22. Your starburst also here on the 15 to 35 millimeter lens for your RF, for your mirrorless cameras. Some of your lenses are known for their outstanding starburst. Your F22 again, or F32, whatever your lowest f-stop is, where the aperture is closed down really tight, that's what gives you the starburst, the beautiful starburst, when you point the camera directly into the sun. So anytime you've got that sun blocked by something, then that gives you the starburst. Notice that the previous photo the sunset. You see how many tiny little rays I have. The better your lens is, the more rays you have. The more traditional your lens is, the less rays that you have. So the rays are all based on the construction of your lens. And some lenses even advertise that they give you an incredible starburst. So it's all based on the construction of the lens. And you see here, this lens gives me kind of a fuzzy starburst. You notice that? And that's because this lens was on its last leg. It had been dropped too many times and it was slightly out of alignment. And then it's not giving me a good starburst anymore. That was one of my indicators that that lens had been abused a little bit too much, was it wouldn't give me a really good starburst. And then when the sun goes all the way below the horizon, then we don't get that starburst anymore. So that starburst is only when we've got that sun partially blocked by something, and then that'll give us those beautiful rays coming through it. And then once again, it all depends on the quality of your lens, what kind of a starburst that you're going to have. Okay, I'm going to unmute you all and see if that little echo went away. There we go. So I'm unmuting you, or asked you to unmute. So you can go ahead and unmute. Any questions on sunsets and starbursts? No, y'all good?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I hear the echo again, so I'm going to mute you all again, if you would, please. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. There you go. I think I can mute you all. There you are. Okay. So your starburst adds to your sunset, but also with your sunset, we've got to think about where you are and what you're doing. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more. But in this situation of this sunset, I knew what location I was going to be. We'll talk about that in just a second. But then the serendipity happened. The rower came through the frame. And this is where that foreground now comes into account. And I want the foreground to be there. So where I might have done an underexposed by 1 or an underexposed by 2 to darken the foreground completely, now I don't want that. So F22 still, but I don't want to be underexposed in this situation, because I do want to be able to see that rower when he comes, in the actual photograph. So be aware of those little serendipity things that are happening. Keep your wits about you. Keep your eyes and ears open to the changing situation when you're doing sunsets, sunrises, because little things are going to make your photo look a lot different than what you originally planned it to look like. So a graduated neutral density filter. Anybody have one? No? Sarah, you all do? Yeah. Unmute. Sorry.
That's okay. I have one, but I haven't really used it much, and I need to, all my lenses are different.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And so I need to get adapters.
Yeah, exactly. So what a graduated neutral density filter does is it looks like this. It's a rectangular filter, smoky on the top to block the light, clear on the bottom to let the light come through. You put it in a holder, and this would be for the Koken holder. You put it in a holder, and the holder screws onto the front of your lens. And then you slide it up and down so that the gray area is covering the sky and the clear area is covering the foreground. So now that you know what it looks like, let's go back to that photograph. So the gray area is covering the top of the photograph. The clear area is on the bottom of the photograph. If you're going to use a graduated neutral density filter, and honestly, I do not use them anymore, and I do not own them anymore, because now what we have available to us in the Adobe products, we just don't need one anymore. So you can use one if you want to, but we just don't need it anymore. But if you are going to put that graduated filter, smoky on the top, clear on the bottom, in front of your scene, to block the exposure up on the top and make your sky darker, you're going to have to switch over to spot metering. And spot metering, not evaluative metering, because evaluative metering, matrix metering, segmented metering would simply read through the filter. But now we want to go into spot meter so that we're only reading through the light through the bottom of the filter. And that's when we'd focus on this little wine glass here. And now we balance the light meter, rebalance the light meter based on the clear area on the bottom of the frame. That allows the top area of the frame to be exposed through the filter. And that's how we end up getting the top darker. So now though, I'm going to end up just doing that later on in processing. So this is one way you can do it. But for me, it's kind of an older way of doing it, but some very, very serious landscape photographers still like to do it this way and still like to use the graduated filters. And the graduated neutral density filters, they have a soft edge or a hard edge. Hard edge is when you're around the ocean where there's a linear horizon. Soft edge is when you're around mountains or other landscapes where we might have a variable horizon. You can get this in a 2-stop dark on the top or a 3-stop dark on the top, based on what you need for your landscape photography. So some very serious landscape photographers still use these. I don't. Questions on these? No. Okay. And the circular one, by the way, has the dark on the top and the clear on the bottom, and there's a definite line right through the middle, but rarely in landscape photography do we put our horizon right in the middle of the photograph. So that's why you don't want to use the circular one. So these variables that we can move up and down in the holder are much more logical to use. Okay. So bottom of page 1, vantage points. So this is Florence. And when you go to scout where you're going to visit, where your location is going to be, if you go on the internet and go to Google Images, and in this case, Google sunsets, Florence, Italy, then you'll start seeing all the sunset photos from Florence, Italy. If you look at a little map of Florence, it's easy to tell if you're facing west, because that's where the sun always sets. Sun always rises in the east. That makes it easy. So if you're facing west and you chart on the map, well, I'm going to put the town hall on my right-hand side and I'm going to put the Arno River in front of me. It's not hard to figure out that this photo was taken from Michelangelo's Hill, okay, or the Plaza of Michelangelo. So when you're going to a location and you want to scout ahead of time where the sunrise or sunset location is going to be, just use Google Image, because it's a great way for you to cut through all the trying to figure out where's the best place to do my sunrise or my sunset, because chances are photographers have already figured out where that spot is. In my book, Photographing Big Bend National Park, I've already told you where I like to go for sunrise and sunset. So, you know, it's already been determined. People have already figured this out. And then that allows you, when you scout a location, to get down to the nitty-gritty and get where you need to go. So understand compass direction, for instance. Sun always sets in the west and it always rises in the east. So we never have to question what the sunrise direction is going to be or the sunset direction is going to be. Here is downtown Cusco, Peru. And when I had the group in Cusco, I knew that I wanted to do a sunset location. It was pretty easy for me to figure out that I wanted to do it from the main square where the 2 cathedrals are, but I needed to figure out a location where we could be. So little Google map, you know, on the internet of the Cusco Square with the 2 cathedrals faced to the west. And then I also used Google Map to figure out what could get me off of the main square. And I found that there was a pizza restaurant. And then if I used Google Earth to rotate around, I saw that that pizza restaurant had sliding glass doors to it. So I figured that if I got my group to that restaurant close to sunset, and then we ordered pizza and beer and we opened all those glass windows, we could use the balcony to take our sunset picture. So that's how I found my location. And then it turned out it was cloudy. So, you know, I got spoofed on that one. But you see that we're still there when we start getting towards sunset. And then I've got the starburst on the lights. So figuring out where your location is going to be, where's there a balcony that I can set up my tripod? Where's there an open space that I can set up my tripod? This is as simple as it is for figuring out where your sunrise or your sunset location is going to be. So just use those wonderful little Google images that we have out there, because it's a great way to figure out where your sunrise or sunset location is going to be. Use your compass directions. Sun always goes down in the west and it always rises in the east. Well, okay, this is Naples, Italy, and Vesuvius is to the east. Vesuvius is a sunrise location, not a sunset location. But if the sun is setting behind us in the west, then we're going to get the sunset light on Mount Vesuvius. And then, okay, so where's a vantage point that I can go? Look on the city map and notice that there's a zigzaggy road going up the hillside. Find a plaza on that zigzaggy road, and chances are there's going to be a place where we can park the vehicle and use it as a sunset location. So just use your compass directions, use your maps that we've got available to us, and this makes it really super simple to do. And then you need to use this thing called time and date, and I use it all the time. So I used it yesterday when I was planning something. I use it all the time. So it's just timeanddate.com. This is the good old paper and pencil method of figuring out where your sun is going to set. So this is for June 2022. This is for June of last year. And on June 6th, 2022, the sun is going to come up in the Houston area, because this is for Houston, because you can put in any city in the world that you want. The sun's going to come up at 6:20 a.m. and the sun is going to set at 8:20 p.m. So it tells you immediately what your sunrise and sunset times are going to be. Your sunrise is going to be at 6:20 and it's going to come up in the compass direction 63 degrees east northeast. And then sunset is going to be at 8:20 p.m. and it's going to be at compass direction 397 west northwest. Okay. How many of you all know how to read a compass? Sort of. Yeah, Jennifer. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Lynette.
Yes.
Lynette. No. You're muted, Lynette. Now remember.
No, I just look at the sun, Kathy.
Okay, you just look at the sun. Now remember that on your cell phone you have a compass. Okay.
Yes.
So you lay it flat and you face it to the north. And then when you lay it flat and face it to the north, then you can see your compass directions of exactly where your sun is going to rise and where your sun is going to set. So we almost always have a compass in our pocket, where we used to not. I used to have to carry one of those plastic compasses around. So this time and date is going to tell you exactly the compass direction of where your sun is going to rise and where your sun is going to set. And you can go forward. So I've already setting travel now for 2025. You can go forward. You can change your city where you're going to be. And so now you've always got a little chart of where your sunrise and your sunset is going to be. So Sarah, you all were just in Arches, and this gives you the ability to figure out exactly what compass direction that sunrise or sunset is going to be. And then during the middle of the day, if you're in some place like Arches where you're traveling around, now you can check your compass direction when you're standing at the various overlooks and figure out which one you're going to come to at sunset. So this gives you the ability to figure out during the middle of the day exactly where your sunset location is going to be or your sunrise location is going to be. So this is time and date, good old pencil and paper method of figuring out where your sunrise is going to be and where your sunset is going to be. And notice, by the way, that it also has astronomical twilight, nautical twilight, and civil twilight, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So we also have all of that information in one quick, handy place that we can easily print out and save with us. So you can also use apps like PhotoPills or Photographer's Ephemeris. Have either one of you all ever used either one of these? No. No, neither one of these. Okay. So you can use PhotoPills or Photographer's Ephemeris. And PhotoPills to me is the easiest one to use, but I'll show you also how to use Photographer's Ephemeris. Honestly, once I figure out this, once I do the pen and paper method on time and date, I don't find that I need the app, but you know, it just depends on what you want to do and what you want to play with. So also take into account one of those. Now, let's look at the different types of twilight, page 2 of your handout, different types of twilight. So I showed them to you on that form from time and date. We have 3 types of twilight in this world. And twilight, or what we call the blue hour, is when the man-made lights are in harmony with the astronomical light, the light from the sky, and we can balance our light meter. So that's why twilight is so important, is because we can balance man-made lights with astronomical lights, and we get these beautiful photographs. So once the sun goes down, I switch my camera to aperture priority. Tripod's a must once you get to your twilight. With the cameras we have today, we always can raise the ISO and hold the camera very steady, and we can take a picture in twilight. You can even take a picture in twilight now with your cell phone, but it is better if we go ahead and use the tripod. And optional, you can go ahead and use your flash if you want to. And then this intervalometer or programmable cable release that we'll talk about a little bit more, this is a good time for it to come into to being also and being introduced. How many of you all own one of these programmable cable releases? Anybody? Yeah, Lynette, you have
We
one?
have one. I don't have a clue how to use it.
Okay, good. I'll teach you how to use it. Jennifer, this is a cable release. It costs $55, and you buy it for the model of camera that you have. Your Nikon cable release will cost, programmable cable release will cost $250. This Velo cable release is just as good. And so it is $55 and it's programmable. And we'll talk about it more and you'll understand why it's so cool and why it's so neat as a programmable cable release. You can set it to not take any pictures for the next 2 hours and then start taking pictures. So you can program it and then walk away from it. And it's fairly easy to program. I have a YouTube video on my YouTube channel on how to set it up. So it's just a real simple little 3-minute video telling you how to set it up. But we'll talk about it more as class goes on. Okay, so the 3 stages of twilight. We have civil twilight that happens from sunset to 35 minutes after sunset. This is when the sun goes below the horizon, and it goes below the horizon for 6 degrees. Nautical twilight happens at the end of the first 35 minutes, and it goes on for another 35 minutes, which puts us at about 60 minutes and 5 seconds, or 65 minutes past sunset. And this is when the sun goes 12 degrees below the horizon and some stars are visible. Astronomical twilight is from the next hour, 60 minutes after sunset, to about the next 30 minutes after sunset, so 60 to 90 minutes after sunset, and the sun is 18 degrees below the horizon. Civil twilight, you and I can see without needing a flashlight. Nautical twilight, most people start feeling like they need a light to see, but we can still see the light on the edge of the horizon. We can still see the mountains on the edge of the horizon, or we can still see the horizon, trees on the edge of the horizon. Astronomical twilight is when most people need a flashlight. The horizon line is becoming obscured by the darkness, and we're seeing more and more stars. You know, this nautical twilight, I always talk about it as nautical twilight, but my boat driver in Romania had to be off the water by the start of astronomical twilight, because that's when the big boats couldn't see us because we were in such a small boat. And so when I said something about we'd like to be out for the blue hour, which is what we call nautical twilight, when I said something about that, he said, but you know, I have to be back by astronomical twilight. And so as a mariner, as a guy out on a boat, he understood these twilights in terms of where he was safe and where he was not safe. So I thought that was kind of interesting that now we could say, okay, I understand why they're called what they are. So civil twilight is where we can see everything, everything's fine, you know, we don't need a flashlight. Nautical twilight is where we can still see the horizon. And this is our magic time when lights look balanced with the sky. Astronomical twilight is when the stars are out, the horizon is getting less easy to see, and mariners in small boats need to be off the water because it's not safe anymore. So I thought that was kind of interesting that I finally saw another logical reason for these different kinds of twilights. So these are the three different kinds of twilights that we have. Once again, you see them on your little chart on time and date. And when that sun starts going below the horizon, we start also getting this blue line at the edge of the horizon with a pink line on top of it. And the pink line, the blue line at the edge of the horizon, is the shadow of the Earth as the sun has gone below the horizon behind us. That's now the shadow of the curve of the Earth. The pink is the last little bits of sunset light, and the pink line is called the belt of Venus. So that belt of Venus is that tiny, tiny, tiny little blue line that happens as the sun is going down. It only lasts for a few minutes, but it's called the belt of Venus. So when we get into civil twilight, the first stage of our twilight, things, remember, look good to our eye, that, you know, we can see things, we can see without a light, but like lights start coming on as they do out here in the Amazon. But the sky is not quite as blue as we would like it to be. We had to do a little bit of processing on this photo to get the sky to look a little bit more blue. So that's civil twilight. Nautical twilight, the sky starts taking on this really pretty blue appearance. And then the man-made lights and the sky are more in balance. So this is where we need to be set up and ready to go and ready to take photographs. So wherever our photo is going to be taken of the blue hour, and I get a little irritated that it's called the blue hour because all of these twilights are based on your latitude on the Earth. Nautical twilight lasts an hour in the northern latitudes like New York and Montana and that type of thing. Nautical twilight here in the Houston area lasts only 35 minutes after sunset. So our nautical twilight is only 35 minutes at this latitude. So wherever you're going to be for what you call the blue hour or these magic photos that we take at twilight, you need to be in location. You need to figure out where you need to be ahead of time, and you need to be in location and ready to go. Because once again, this is only going to last for a very short period of time. This shot of Cordoba in Cordoba, Spain, and the Andalusia region of Spain, it was absolutely lovely. Several years ago, when I took this photo, I returned last year to this exact same location, and all of these little trees have grown up and they completely obscure the view. So you have to go to another place on the other side. So this is where the scouting comes in. You got to get there, scout it ahead of time, and make sure that you don't have to move anywhere. So that astronomical twilight, figure out where you need to be. We've got a balanced light meter between the sky and the man-made lights. So we shouldn't have to do any underexposure or overexposure, but figure out where you're going to be, get your photo in mind, and then start taking pictures for that 35 minutes because it's going to go by very, very fast. But this is when things look good with man-made lights up against the beautiful nautical twilight of the sky. This is when it's time just to take pictures like crazy for that 35 minutes, but make sure you're in a location where you need to be, because there's not a lot of time to run to the next location. Do your pre-scouting, figure out where you need to be, and make sure that you're at that location and you can maximize this beautiful time of the night. And remember that starburst on your lights, F22. So for me at this point, I'm at F22 the entire time, as long as I can be there. So just figure out where you need to be. All different times of year of different trips that I've taken to the Arno River and different shots looking back in Florence. And this is your time also for your starburst on the lights. It's a long shutter speed, so that means that tourist will disappear. If you want people to see the tourist, then go F8 so that people can see the tourist. But if you want the tourist to disappear, then do an F22 so that we can make them disappear. So longer exposure is going to make people disappear, except that irritating group of tourists right there. But shorter exposure will show the crowds, because sometimes you want to show the crowds. So sometimes we're going to do the starburst, sometimes we're not. It all depends on what you're trying to do when you're doing your sunset locations. But by all means, be in position and ready to go, because chances are there's going to be some other photographers there if it's a real popular location. So you might need to stake out your location. And then also chances are you might need to move around just a little bit based on what's going on in the location, but stake out your location, figure out where you're going to be, and get ready to do it. Nautical twilight happens in the morning as well. So if you're a morning person, then you're going to get the exact same thing in the morning, except it's totally dark, astronomical twilight, nautical twilight, civil twilight. So you got to get your photography done during that blue hour of the sunrise, because it's just like the blue hour of the sunset. But it lasts 35 minutes, remember. So position yourself where you need to be, figure out where you need to be, and get ready to take your photographs and have a good time doing it. Starburst, whatever you want to do. And then sometimes also by Google Earth, another thing that'll help you out with your sunrise, sunset photography. I'm always concerned about safety, and you're women like I am, so I'm sure you're doing the same thing. You're always concerned about your safety, your personal safety, especially if you're out at dark. Finding on Google Earth, this is a place in Andalusia, in Sevilla. I found that there was this big, huge marked off area in the street in front of the big door of the Alcazar. And I figured that would be a nice place for us to go early in the morning, and we wouldn't have to worry about taxi cabs or delivery vehicles obscuring our area, because we were in that pedestrian walkway, that big, huge pedestrian walkway. Luck would have it that some workmen came along and opened the doors to the Alcazar. And so I just told my people, get in fast, take your pictures fast, and get out of the way, and don't stand in each other's way. So we all moved in with our tripods, positioned the cathedral spire like we wanted it to be. And then when we were finished, everybody went around the corner, and then the workmen started coming in. So sometimes when luck happens, you just need to take advantage of it. So that gave us the ability to go inside the Alcazar right before sunset or sunrise in the morning. So take advantage of those opportunities. So that twilight hour continues to grow. Take advantage of it. Get to the place where you need to be. Even here, it's a hotel room, and I just stacked my camera on a whole bunch of telephone books in the old days when we had fat telephone books, and positioned it against the window. If you are going to photograph from a hotel window or another area where you're using the window, the lens of your camera has to be completely against the window so that you don't see any lights from the interior of the room. So your camera has to be held right against the window if you're going to do that. So just magical locations. And then if there's any sort of fountains in your twilight photograph, then remember that water blurs in 1/8 of a second. You all remember that from basic photography class. So if your shutter speed goes down nice and low, then you can blur your water. And then also remember that shutter speed does matter though, because that cruise ship out there in the water was coming into port. And if I used a long shutter speed, it would be just a streak of light. So to see the definition of the cruise ship, I needed to go back to about a 60th of a second on my shutter speed. So that's changing your aperture, lowering your ISO if you're in aperture priority until you get the shutter speed that you're looking for. So remember, if you're trying to stop something at your twilight photographs, then your shutter speed is going to matter. Same thing if there's a moon. We'll talk about moons as we go along. And then remember that you can also do something like the aurora borealis at twilight. It doesn't always come out at twilight, but sometimes it does. And then if you're trying to stop something that's moving faster, then ISO is really going to matter, like this tall-masted sailing ship coming through the harbor of Venice. This is when a really high ISO definitely mattered because I needed to stop that shutter speed. And you notice that the waves aren't blurred here, the waves are definite. So that's telling you that I'm about a 60th of a second shutter speed. So you gotta change based on what's going on. And whether you want a long shutter speed or a short shutter speed depends on whether you want a blur movement or stop movement. And blurring movement, because we've got more of the water being blurred. And then as it gets darker and darker, then we're going to have to go faster shutter speed. I show you this Ferris wheel at Pleasure Pier, because if the lighted Ferris wheel goes all the way around several times, all the lights will be white. You won't get any color. So the only way you're going to get color, because as the lights go around and they overlay each other, eventually all the colors become white. So if you want to try to capture the colors in something like the Ferris wheel, then you're going to have to use a faster shutter speed to stop the movement and isolate the colors. And then once it gets too dark, that's it. Your Ferris wheel is going to become white. So we're not going to be able to stop the colors again. But this is when we can play around with colors in the waves and things like that. So once it gets too dark, then we just miss that astronomical twilight. So another thing to remember about this astronomical twilight is that, nautical twilight, is that if you notice that the colors aren't as intense as you want them to be, I use an auto white balance when I'm photographing. But when I looked at this photo on the back of my camera, it just didn't have the intensity of color that I wanted to. When I brought it into the Adobe products, I used the white balance tool, which is just a little eyedropper next to your white balance slider. And I touched the eyedropper to this white light on the top of the minaret, and I got the color that I was looking for. So sometimes when you have too many man-made lights, you won't quite get the blue that you're looking for. We can adjust that later on in Photoshop, Lightroom, Adobe Camera Raw. And all I did was take the Lightroom eyedropper and touch the white of the minaret right there, and it changed my blue color of the sky. Okay, so questions on that? Unmute yourself. Questions? None? Y'all good?
My question will be when I'm doing the assignment.
And then you wish I was standing next to you.
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
Yes.
I
So
think
that
we should have a workshop immediately after classes.
so that you all can figure, so that I can help you when we're doing it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's
Jennifer,
why I like to go to photography um, tours or whatever to be with you, because that's when I learn.
yeah, yeah, it's true. We learn a lot when we're out there together. We do. We do.
I do.
Jennifer or Sarah, questions before we move on? Sarah, unmute.
The picture with the Ferris wheel that had the really nice color, you said, you know, you had to use a little bit faster shutter speed so it didn't blend into white. Do you remember approximately where you were in shutter speed for that
You
color?
know, it only captures a part of the revolution of the ride going around, you know, this white ride right here. It only captures a little bit of that. So that tells me maybe a half second or a third second.
Okay,
So fairly fast.
but still slower than what my mind was
Yes,
thinking.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Okay,
About a half second. Because the Ferris wheel, if you think about it, is going fairly slow. So I just need a little bit while the lights on the Ferris wheel are still the same color.
got it.
Okay, get yourselves back again, because I see we get there we go. Okay, so your homework for this section of class, but we're not finished yet, but your homework for this section of class, and you got your homework assignments on a separate page. So your homework for this section of class is you're going to photograph a sunrise or a sunset, whichever one you want to do. So that's going to be assignment number 1. Assignment number 2 is I want you to silhouette something that's recognizable, a windmill or a tree or a house, something that's recognizable against that sunset as well. So you've got one photo of just the sunset, one photo of something where something is silhouetted against the sunset. You have an entire week, remember, or you can do these in the same location wherever you want. And then I would like you to photograph a scene with man-made lights at twilight. So maybe a bridge at twilight, a shopping district at twilight, a cityscape at twilight. I'd like you to avoid something that's really, really bright, like a stadium or something like that, or a shopping center. Usually your stadiums are too brightly lit at night for us to photograph them and still get the night sky looking pleasant. So you've got 3 photos that you're going to produce for your homework. You're going to photograph the sunrise or sunset. You're going to photograph a recognizable silhouette so we can tell what it is. And then you're going to photograph a scene with man-made lights at twilight. So you're going to go down to, you know, city center or something like that, where you've got something with man-made lights that you can photograph. Y'all good with that? Yep. Okay. So that's your first homework assignment. But we need to kind of race forward a little bit. And I need to introduce you to star photography. So if you would flip over to the page that has the heading on it, Photographing Stars. Everybody there? Yep. Okay. Lynette, you there? Got it? Okay, good. Okay, everybody's good. Now, why I'm jumping ahead or I'm moving out of order is because starting Saturday is our darkest sky of the month while we're meeting in class. So instead of doing stars later on when the sky is more bright, if we're going to get any successful photos of stars, then now is the time to do this. And Lynette, I know that you're in a fairly dark location. Sarah's in a fairly dark location. Jennifer, where are you? Unmute for me.
It's not very dark.
Yeah. Where are
I'm in
you?
a neighborhood and my neighborhood is right next to a freeway where they just erected brand new giant lights. So it's kind of a suburban area.
Yeah. So it's going to be a challenge.
Hmm.
Yes, it's going to be a challenge, and that's okay. It can
Yeah.
be a challenge. Sarah, where you are is fairly dark, right? I mean, fairly.
Well, there are areas around that are. At my immediate house, it used to be, it no longer is. I have neighbors in the front, neighbors in the back that seem that they are on a mission to light up the planet.
Yep. Understand. Yeah. Yeah. And Lynette's in the same position. She's out in the country, but suburbia is getting closer and closer to her. And so go ahead, Lynette.
I had to move to the lake to get it really dark because the corner store lights up the whole place.
That's right.
But it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can go to the lake anytime.
Okay. See, I'm in the same position. You know, I'm in suburbia. You know, it's hard. So I understand that this star photography is going to be hard, but at the same time, this is introducing you to star photography. So if it means that you want to go ahead and go to, you know, a darker location, then feel free to do that, because at least you could try. So Jennifer, in our area, for instance, we've got some wildlife refuges that are open all night long. And so this is an opportunity that's where I would go, for instance, is I would try to do something like that. So, you know, just as a hint, depends on what you're going to be able to do where you are. But this is the darkest part we're going to be right now, beginning on Saturday. So this is our introduction to star photography, and then you can use it when you really are in a super dark location. So introduction to star photography. So the pinpoint stars, this is where we take a photograph where the stars have no movement in them at all. So we want to take a photo that looks like this, where the stars are just nice little round circles. But if you blow this photo up, you'll notice that in the edges, and this is what you want to look for, is the edges. The edges, I'm seeing nothing but little pinpointy stars. And that's what we're going for with a pinpoint star photograph, is even toward the edges, I don't have any smudging of the stars. So when we're going for pinpoint stars, you need to check the edges of your photograph to see whether the stars are blurring toward the edge of the lens. So this comes important because if you notice in this photograph, I don't know if I did blow it up. This becomes important because in this photograph, I got the comet, Neowise, but brain didn't kick in and I blurred my stars. So instead of setting the shutter speed properly to freeze my stars and still get my comet, my photograph to me is a miss because yes, I got the comet, but I blurred my stars. So my exposure was too long instead of being shorter. So that's where those pinpoint stars come in. Now, let me tell you about this photo of Neowise. Neowise came around during COVID, and we weren't supposed to be going anywhere. We were supposed to be isolating. In our area, in the Houston area, there was just no place I could go where the sky was dark enough, but I wanted this comet, and I used a chart or a map called Dark Skies. And all you have to do is Google dark sky map, and it'll show you a dark sky map of the entire United States. So I took Texas and kept magnifying until I found a dark sky, a pocket of dark sky within driving distance of Houston where I felt safe. Once again, you got to feel safe if you're out there by yourself. So there happens to be a pocket of dark sky north of Houston in the Centerville area out on the Trinity River. And using Google Map again, I saw that those were farm fields and they were just farm roads between the farm fields. So I figured, okay, that's safe. Nobody's going to bother me out there. So I drove all the way out there, and knowing that Neowise was only going to be visible on the horizon for a very short period of time, I got myself all set up and ready to go to do my photo. And then of course the clouds moved in. So I got blown out. That was it. So the clouds moved in, and from there on, it was cloudy. So this is my only photo that I got of Neowise, but that's how I went planning it. And all the cows in each one of the fields around me decided that I was the most interesting thing they'd ever seen. And so I was surrounded by cows wanting to know what I was doing, which then was turning on the lights in the houses, trying to figure out who's out on the road bothering the cows, So anyway, you got to watch those pinpoint stars because that'll ruin it. So here's the mathematical calculation for your pinpoint stars. So based on the lens you are using, you take 500 divided by the millimeters of your lens, and that'll tell you mathematically what the exposure is, 31 seconds. So if your lens is a 16 millimeter, then it would be 31 seconds. If your lens is an 18 millimeter, then it would be 27 seconds. If your lens is a 10 millimeter, then it would be 50 seconds. Except you need to test that. And if you have a crop factor, Jennifer, is your sensor cropped?
I have no idea. I don't know how to tell that.
You're the Nikon, which one?
Yes. D5.
D5, 5D, D5. It shouldn't be cropped. You should have a full sensor camera. The way you can find out, Jennifer, is check on B&H, and under specs, or at the Nikon site, under specs, it'll tell you that it is a 1.5 sensor, slightly smaller, or a 35 millimeter sensor. So it'll tell you one way. Okay.
Okay.
If you're using a crop factor, and I know Lynette, you're not, and Sarah, you're not, but if you're using a crop factor, then we need to put the crop factor in 1.6 or 1.3. And Jennifer, come back on one more time. What subject do you teach?
I'm a librarian, but
You're the librarian. Okay.
I
okay.
also serve for the communications department. So that's why I'm doing this. So
That's why you got to do the photography. Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting with this formula right here is the parentheses where we were taught to do those when we were in math class in like 7th grade or 8th grade. A lot of adults have forgotten that. So it has to be the parentheses, otherwise you get the wrong, and you have to do the math inside the parentheses and then divide that by 500. Otherwise you get the wrong calculation over here. So a lot of adults have forgotten that. So just as an FYI, okay? But now that you figured out what your shutter speed will be, then you put your camera on the tripod, set your shutter speed to that in the manual mode, open up your aperture to as wide as it'll go, 2.8, 3.5, 4.5, whatever you want to do. ISO, raise it to 600 or 800. Or maybe even 1800, depending on how dark the sky is, and then take your picture. So you open your f-stop on your handout. I've given that to you. You open your f-stop to the widest f-stop you can get it. And then you set your ISO high. And in this photo, if you look at those edges, though, you'll notice that I blurred those stars. So mathematically, this lens is supposed to go to 30 seconds. But when I go to 30 seconds, the stars on the edges are blurred. So this lens, once I started messing with it, this is a 15mm lens. It turns out to be the ideal shutter speed for pinpoint stars is 15 seconds, not 30 seconds. So even though everything that we've been told is that we take 500 divided by the millimeters of the lens, and that's our shutter speed, that doesn't always hold true. So you have to test your lens. And then once you learn for that lens, the shutter speed for pinpoint stars is X, then it always is. You don't have to worry about it. So once you get it set, then you know what your shutter speed always is for that lens. But remember, if you zoom your lens for composition, so you have a 15 to 35mm lens, but we're going to zoom it to 20, then your shutter speed's going to be different. So you can think you've got all this in your, all this set, but then you get out there in the field and that's where you start blowing it without doing the calculations and without keeping your head about you while you're working on it. So tripod's absolutely necessary. There's no way we can do it without a tripod. And then once you get everything set, then you can go around and you can photograph any pinpoint stars you want anywhere in the world, doing anything that you want with your foreground. Because once you figure out for that lens what my shutter speed is, wide open aperture, ISO of 800 or 1600, then photography from there on is just routine. So then you just put your camera on the tripod and you go for it, because now it becomes a routine. And I've got a little bit of movement in these stars as well. So you've always got to keep your head about you and pay attention. And then this is how we do the Aurora Borealis, by the way, because you don't want streaky stars in your Aurora Borealis. You want pinpoint stars in your Aurora Borealis. So once you get your shutter speed set for that lens on that zoom area, wherever you are in that lens, then from there on, wide open aperture, ISO 800 to 1600, and then you can just photograph all night long. Make sense? So it's pretty routine once you know for each one of your lenses what your shutter speed is. And then you can do all kinds of stuff. So this is the Perseid meteor shower 1 year, and it's a composite of all the flying objects that I got throughout the night. So it's one picture of the star field. And then each picture after that, I just erased all the way around it. It was a pain in the butt. I erased all the way around it and only kept the flying objects through the sky. Anything that has, by the way, the little bleep of light on it, these right here, those are man-made objects that are reflecting off the sun as it moves through the air. The meteors are the straight streaks with no blips in the light. So really what you get if you leave your camera out all night long during the meteor shower is more airplanes and satellites than meteors. Very, very few meteors come through. And I wanted to show you this in just differences in cameras. So this is the 5D Mark IV by Canon, so at the professional line, and this is ISO 1600. And this is my Rebel T6i at ISO 1600. Do you see the difference in the noise? See the difference in the noise? Yeah. So the more expensive your camera is and the better your camera is, the less noise you're going to have at these high ISOs at night. So we don't want to raise the ISO too high on an older camera like that Canon Rebel. So tripod, I think everybody's got a tripod, but just in case you haven't, my tripod's the Mi Photo Globetrotter. Just in case you haven't had one, $319. Excellent tripod, holds your camera nice and steady, lightweight, easy to use. And then you also have to know how to set your lens on infinity. So on Jennifer, on your lenses, on Nikons, you put the gold line in the middle of the infinity symbol. Do you see that on your lens? Yeah. Okay. That focuses you on infinity. And then you turn off your autofocus, turn off your image stabilization. You turn off image stabilization and autofocus for all your star photography. So Jennifer, on all your Nikon lenses, gold line goes right in the middle of the infinity symbol, and that makes your photograph in focus. Canon, on the other hand, is white line on the middle of the white line. So Canon focuses on infinity at white line on the white line. And then mirrorless cameras, Lynette on your camera and Rich and Sarah on your camera, mirrorless. When we go to manual focus on the back of the camera, we put the line in the middle of the infinity symbol right there. So it's not on the lens, it's on the back of the camera. So finally, for once, Canon has gone in the middle of the infinity symbol because everybody else does the middle of the infinity symbol. So you have to figure out how your camera focuses to make sure you're focused on infinity. On my lenses with Canon, and I'll pass this along, Lynette, for you, if I move the camera on the tripod, I have to refocus because the new lenses slip. So I either have to refocus every single time or I have to check focus regularly. Sarah, I don't know how it is on your mirrorless lenses, but you might check that as well. Some people tape their lenses into position so they don't have to worry about them moving. Also on my Canon cameras, my mirrorless, if I turn the camera off and on, the focus resets. So when I turn the camera back on, I have to refocus it again. Total pain in the butt. I've never had to do that on a digital SLR, but on the mirrorless, I do. So you've just got to know you're in the dark, remember. So you just got to know how to focus and make sure you are definitely in focus. Questions on that? So test all that before you get in the dark. And then it's being outside and continuing on to the following page, photographing the stars continuous. Now we'll talk about the Milky Way. So the Milky Way is visible in the night sky in the Northern Hemisphere from February to November. February, though, the Milky Way lies down on the horizon. We barely see the Milky Way. And March, it comes up a little bit more, and April, it comes up a little bit more, and it comes up into a nice arch in April and May. And then it starts standing upright, nice and proud through June, July, and August, not even June yet, July, August, and September, and then it starts fading back down. So the Milky Way is easy to photograph in the Northern Hemisphere, even though we can see it from February to November. It's best to photograph it from April to about September. So we're right in the heart of Milky Way season. A reason to find some dark skies right now, because now's the time to be able to photograph the Milky Way. We can do an arc of the Milky Way, and the Milky Way in this case is out in Big Bend from the southeast sky to the northwest sky. It arcs from southeast to northwest. And because southeast to northwest is arcing overhead, this is a panoramic shot. So this is about 15 or 20 photos of me arcing the camera overhead in the most weird positions while still keeping the horizon in the bottom of the frame. And it's about 15 or 20 verticals. So I'm arcing the camera overhead while still keeping the horizon in the bottom of every frame. And then I blended it as a panoramic. It was really hard to do. Go ahead, Sarah, ask a question. Unmute so I can hear you. No, that's okay.
How did you do that?
It was hard. It was really hard because the camera's on the tripod. It's vertical. So you're in the little notch so that the camera can go vertical. And then for each vertical shot, I had to make sure that the horizon was in the bottom of the frame. And the Milky Way is going over my head with a wide angle lens. So there were a lot of very strange body contortions. It was hard. Yeah, it was very hard. And it's a little easier to do this in the April, May period of time because the arc of the Milky Way is not overhead, it's still closer to the horizon. So it's a little easier to do in April and May than it is during the summer months. Yeah. But it worked. And then here's the Milky Way standing upright when this is in Romania, in a remote location in Romania. This is just a remote little village down there. And it's amazing how much light it has. But you all have all talked about your neighbors who are trying to light up, land the space station in their backyards with all their lights. Yeah. We have somebody who started doing that. We're going to have a conversation. Yeah. But anyway, Milky Way up. And then this is where you can start playing with lighting the foreground or putting things in the foreground. Once we get the pinpoint stars and we get the Milky Way, now we can start putting things in the foreground and playing around with it. Here's the foreground, and this is lit up with just a little light, a little LED light. I'll show you those in a minute where we're painting the foreground with the light. Here's again an early Milky Way. This is April Milky Way in the Texas Hill Country. This one came up at 4:30 something, and you could only see the Milky Way for about 15 minutes before the sun peaked over the horizon. So it's a difficult thing to photograph in an area, just depending on where you are and what you're doing. You got to chase this Milky Way. That's why I'm telling you this now, because now we're in the dark part of the month because the moon has gone away. So using a phone app called Sky Guide, and this is just an app that you download off the internet called Sky Guide. I dialed in today, 6:15 at 10:36 p.m. tonight. So from my location where I am, if I go to the southeast at 10:39 or 10:36 p.m. tonight, and if I point my camera to the southeast, the galactic cloud of the Milky Way is in the sky. If the sky's dark enough. The galactic cloud, because we're out on the edge of the Milky Way, the galactic cloud is looking back toward the center of the Milky Way. So the giant, huge star spiral that we're in is called the Milky Way, and our planet is on the edge of it. And the galactic cloud is looking back toward the center of the Milky Way. So that's the center of our galaxy right there. That's why it looks so dramatic. And what time does it come above the horizon? Comes above the horizon about 9 something, but it's not totally visible because of the sun going down until 10:36. So how did I know that? Sky Guide, the app, told me that. So it's a free app that you download. And this is where anywhere I am in the world, I can figure out where the Milky Way. Like last week when I was in Romania, I was curious if we could get a Milky Way shot. And in Romania, it was too low on the horizon for us to get a halfway decent shot. So we didn't even try. There's another app called Stellarium that I don't like as much. I like Sky Guide, but there's another app called Stellarium. A lot of photographers like to use it. So it all depends on what app works for you. But it shows me that if I'm in the southeast, once again, tonight at 10:30 something, here's the Milky Way. So these apps on your phone are very nice because they give you an idea of what it's supposed to look like if you have a totally dark sky. So Sky Guide is one app. or Stellarium is the other app. And I happen to use Sky Guide because I just find it easier to use. It just fits with my brain. Question on using any of these apps? Unmute, Lynette.
I'm good. I might go tonight and see.
Drive out there in the little vehicle at 10:30 at night and
Yep.
see what it looks like, right? Yeah.
Hopefully there are no alligators in the road.
That's right. No alligators in the road. They live on a big piece of property, so she might have alligators on the road. And hopefully it's not cloudy too, because all it takes is a cloudy sky or a foggy sky and we're knocked out of it. Now, in this location, in where I am in the Houston area, we can get the Milky Way from the Atwater Prairie Chicken Reserve Refuge out in Sealy. We can get the Milky Way from there, and we can get the Milky Way from the Anahuac National Wildlife Refuge on the east side of town. We can get the Milky Way from Huntsville State Park, but Huntsville State Park closes at 10 o'clock. So you have to be out of there by 10 o'clock or you have to spend the night in the park. So we can get the Milky Way from some of these more remote locations, but it would just take a little bit of research for you to do. So that's how you can photograph the Milky Way in case you want to be that adventurous. So Sarah, in your area, I'm sure there's some place that you might be able to go as well. Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Have your skies been super hazy lately?
They are because of the fires. Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know what that's gonna, because it's been continual haze. I mean, it's dense haze.
It's dense haze. So you've got a lot of it going on then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't been home. I just got home on Monday, so I haven't been home a lot to check out the skies, but I did notice a little bit of haze. Now, whether we can see any stars, I don't really know. So we'll have to see. So star trails, I'm going to give this to you as well. Just in the event that you find yourself in a dark sky area within the next week, because once the moon starts coming up, then it gets a little bit more challenging and the moon will start getting brighter and brighter and brighter once again toward the July 4th holiday. So star trails, I'll throw this at you also just so that you can get it. No, I'm not. I'm going to hold off on star trails until next lesson because that way I don't throw too much at you. So if you want to try to work on some pinpoint stars, then over this next week, then try to work on some pinpoint stars. And then maybe if it works, because it's your best opportunity while we've got class going on. And then I'm going to hold off on star trails till next go around. Okay. So your homework assignment, I think I've got it in here. 1 second. These are star trails, by the way. I think I tacked it on at the end. No, I'll get it back there. I didn't tack it on at the end. There you go. Okay. And blending instructions. Okay. So questions on any of your homework assignments or anything that I've covered, you all can unmute now. Questions?
So there's not a homework assignment for pinpoint stars, or there is?
There is a homework assignment for pinpoint stars. It's the one for star photography. It's one for you're going to present it in class 3. But this is just in case you want to try to get out there now.
Just get ahead of it. Okay.
Get ahead of it. Exactly.
Okay.
So the only homework assignments I expect from you are your sunrise, sunset shots and your 3 photos for that. But if you can get out there, then this would be a good time for you to try to work ahead and work on your pinpoint stars.
Okay. Got it.
If you can. So just in case you find yourself in that really cool location or you find yourself where you're able to get it. Because
Right.
when the moon gets brighter, then the pinpoint stars get harder to capture. When the moon
Mhm.
gets brighter, it's harder to capture the Milky Way. So this is just in case you get out there.
Okay.
Okay. So questions? Nope. And you all have done these before. So you can email the photos to me, resize them, 1280 on the longest side by 96 pixels on the shortest side. Those are small enough that you can email them to me. There's no need that you would need to put them in a Dropbox or anything like that. Just email them to me.
Oh,
And-
email.
It's just as easy. And then if you would have them to me by 5 o'clock the day before class. So on the 21st, if you would have them to me in the evening. If you're running behind, don't worry about it. I'll take them until right before class if you can.
1280 by 960, you said?
Yeah, 1280, 960 DPI. So not by 960, but 1280 on the longest side by 96 DPI.
Oh, okay.
Or excuse me, erase. I just did what you did. 1280 on the longest side at 96 DPI. Mhm. Let the shortest side go wherever it will.
Got it.
And if you don't remember how to resize photos, there's also a video on my YouTube channel about that. Okay. So we're all heading over to Lynette's house and we're going to go out to the lake.
Come on. You're welcome.
Oh, there's Kitty. Hey, baby.
Yeah, she's been keeping me company on the desk and getting in the way.
Well, she wants to learn all about this too. It's important for them.
Sounds like my dog.
Yes, yes. The pets love these Zoom calls. They get to be included in the humans talking. There's something about humans talking that these animals are just totally engrossed in. Okay, if you all don't have any questions, then I'm going to end the recording and end class. Okay. I'm going to
Okay.
end the recording.